Okay, you're live, Mayor.
Okay, let's call to order the special meeting of the City Council for February 17th. Before the roll call, the city attorney has an announcement.
Good evening, Mayor Hudson and Council. Assembly Bill 361 suspends provisions of the Brown Act allowing public meetings like this one to be held by teleconference and help prevent the spread of COVID-19. Mr. Mayor, please recognize me after roll call so that I can confirm some matters for the record.
Okay, roll call, please.
Councilmember Armstrong.
Here.
Councilmember Burrows.
Here.
Councilmember Perkins.
Here.
Vice Mayor Burrows.
Here.
Councilmember Zafar.
Here.
And Mayor Hudson.
Here.
Thank you.
Mayor recognizes the city attorney.
Thank you. And based on the responses to the roll call, the record should reflect that all council members can hear the proceedings clearly. And if there is no objection, the record should further reflect that each council member believes that everyone that is present, that is representing themselves to be council members, are in fact council members.
We are.
Great. Seeing no objection, I'll turn the meeting back over to the
Hey, you
mayor.
turn the mayor over to the meeting
And
too.
remind
Okay,
you-
let's get on to the highlight of the
Thank you.
evening, because it's been a long evening. And that is item 2.1, a public hearing, the third public hearing, 2021-2022 redistricting process. And we will bring it back to the city attorney to introduce our presenter. If we have promoted him, hopefully he's with us. Oh, well, we don't, so you're gonna have to stretch it out, Martin. You're gonna have to do some filler until he gets here.
I'll do what I can. And
Okay.
Good evening again, Mayor Hudson, and good evening, Council. Well, tonight we're here at public hearing number 3 out of our 4 required public hearings for redistricting. And as promised, tonight we're going to be looking at actual proposed redistricting maps. 5 plans from our demographer, Michael Wagaman. Plans green, blue, purple, red, and orange are all attached to your staff report. And there's also one submitted by the public and included in the staff report, which is identified appropriately as Plan Public 1. Finally, we had 2 late submittals, which have been provided to the council by email, and they're also available for public viewing on the city's website on the district elections page. I believe Michael is here to
Perfect timing.
to walk us through the maps, and he'll solicit input from both the council and the public. And then before I turn it over to Michael, just a quick word about next steps. At next Tuesday's meeting, and this will be independent of this particular process, I'm going to be introducing a proposed ordinance to the council that's going to allow the council to change the boundary maps by resolution instead of having to pass an ordinance every 10 years.
Okay.
If it's adopted, the council will be able to adopt the resolution at the next redistricting hearing on March 22nd. And hopefully the process will be complete as of that date. I'll give you a full staff report on that next week. So for tonight's order of business, I'll turn the meeting over to Michael for the unveiling of the proposed maps.
Michael, we're glad to see it. Well, you're not on my map right now. I'm willing to go over to another one. Why don't you take us through this redistricting?
All right, and you'll see me here, but I'm going to turn off my video and just go straight into the screen share. And hopefully everybody will be able to see that.
Yes.
And we're going to have a short pre-PowerPoint, but it'll be quick because I know everyone wants to just talk about the maps. And again, as was noted, this is kind of a pivot point in the process where before everything was abstracted, now we're going to be looking at actual plans. And second, before the goal really wasn't to reach consensus. So, different council members had different ideas last time, and that was fine. And that's why you're seeing now different options. But this is that opportunity now to start narrowing those down. Now, that does not mean the goal tonight is to land this. There may be areas where there's still open items of still discussion that you want to have as a body. Or there are things where something is close but not quite right. And that's perfectly fine because, again, you're not limited to the plans presented this evening. And you're certainly not trying to select a plan this evening. And indeed, the schedule assumes that there may be refinements out of tonight and that you would get refined maps before the next meeting. And as a reminder, at that next meeting in March, if we have a refined map that isn't quite there still, we can go through the live line drawing process there where we'll move those final blocks around with the goal of landing that map by March 22nd, knowing you have an April 17th deadline for adoption, which is part of the reason of going through the process of allowing that to be done by resolution to allow as much time as possible for this process, to allow as much time for public feedback as possible. As a reminder for any maps that are produced this evening, the goal is to have those out at least 7 days in advance of that March 22nd hearing. As a practical matter, we're going to try to get them up as soon as possible, again, to allow as much time for the public to give you feedback. These are the criteria that are spelled out in state law. I'm not going to belabor them because I think you're all starting to becoming experts on this stuff. I will say, though, that these are things to think about as you're looking at plans and providing feedback, is bringing it back to those criteria. So I really like this plan because it did a good job of using understandable boundaries in X. Or I didn't like that plan as much because it split a community of interest in Y. So it gives you that foundation. And then just as a reminder, that in looking at these, it does appear the city may have some federal Voting Rights Act issues, particularly as relates to making sure that the voting rights of the API community in the eastern half of the city are protected. I will note that all of the plans I put together, race was not used as the predominant factor, but those lines were reviewed by outside counsel. And if there are additional questions, we can talk about those as we go through. As was noted first, I'm only going to present the 5 plans that I put together based on your prior direction, though I do have the other plans loaded in the system. That also includes the 2 plans that were late and were added in. So I do have those available now in the system. They just weren't in the system when we put out all the materials for this meeting. And then just as a reminder, most of the direction last time looked at a couple of things, which are, one, how to require some of the balance, the population balance where some of your districts were out of balance. And so you needed to get to that equal population requirement. There were those handful of census blocks that were split where we needed to resolve those. There's discussion about looking at future population growth. And there were some specific communities of interest identified, underground HOAs, the Gale Ranch area, and Windermere. And with that, I'm going to switch over here to the interactive software, which hopefully will be popping up here shortly for you. And again, as a reminder, this is software where we can turn on and off different layers as we go through the discussion. And as an example, that one thing I do want to remind you about is that split block issue, because it's something we really didn't talk about a lot at hearing number 2, but actually did play a role in the process of drawing these lines. So I do want to remind you about it so you know where that's in play. So these are your existing district boundaries after the annexes that have been completed. And these are the census blocks. And there are the 3 census blocks that are highlighted in blue, purple, and red. And as you can see, those are split by multiple districts. And in the case of the red block, is actually split into 3 different districts currently. And because that's the geography we get from the census, those areas need to be kept whole. So that's an area where we have to make changes. I'll say the blue block was generally pretty easy to resolve by kind of making El Costa the boundary between District 1 and District 4. But the purple and the red block, because they're kind of in that confluence of 3 different districts, it does have an impact as far as what you do with those. And it was an area we didn't have really a lot of direction at the second hearing. And so it is an area that, as you look at these plans, what you like, what you don't, thinking about, is there additional clarifying direction in that area? With that, I'll turn those blocks off and hop straight into the green plan. And as a note on the green plan, one of the goals here was kind of minimize the number of changes, kind of do that, as close to your existing districts as possible. So I'm going to overlay here your existing districts and the green the existing districts with the annex. There we go. And the green plan, so you can kind of see where those changes were. And you see the bulk of the changes were in those areas where those census blocks had to be resolved. Where again, you see that shift to use Alcosta as the dividing line. And you see the Coyote Creek basically is established as the dividing line between districts 2 and 3.
So
I'm going to
through the
turn
mayor,
off.
quick question, what are those census blocks? Like, what does it mean?
Sure. I apologize. So census blocks, I'm going to turn off these districts again and bring them back up. So the census is a head count of every single person. So they go around and count every single person, but they don't report the census with 3 people lived in this household and 2 people lived in that household. Rather, they aggregate data to what are called census blocks. And those sometimes correspond to actual city blocks and sometimes they don't. So if you look at this map, those green lines, those are the census blocks that the federal government uses to report the results of the US Census. And they are the smallest level of geography we have. So there's no way to know if they say there are 500 people who live in this block, how many live in the north half versus the south half. So if you recall, equal population was our most important criterion. And therefore, you kind of have to keep census blocks, particularly populated census blocks, whole, because otherwise you have no idea how many people live on which side of the line. Did that answer the question?
Okay.
I had a question on that too. I mean, I got the census block thing, the green blocks, but can you again explain the blue, the purple, and the red?
Yeah.
Why we have to keep those together, or whatever you said about those?
Yeah, that was my question.
So you have to keep all of those census blocks whole. The problem that we have is your existing district boundaries. Oops, I'm going to put them on with the annex. Are actually splitting 3 of those census blocks.
Right.
And the reason for that is, and it's kind of a quirk, is the Census Bureau actually has a program called the Block Boundary Suggestion Project, where local governments are able to tell the federal government, or suggest, not tell, to the federal government, hey, these are the places those census blocks should go to, for example, not screw up our district boundaries. And to give us that flexibility. The problem with that program is it is generally run in the 6th year. So that program was going on in 2016, which had a little problem in that you didn't know you were even going to have district boundaries, let alone where they were going to be when this was going on. And so this is something that really won't be an issue when you redistrict in 2031, but where you're redistricting now, those 3 census blocks that I highlighted are areas where even if you love your existing district boundaries, think they're perfect, you have to make some changes to conform to that federal geography we inherited from the federal government. It's something we talked about way back during hearing 1, didn't really talk about it hearing 2. It ended up actually influencing some of these lines because, again, when I started drawing, particularly these 2 are kind of at the confluence of multiple districts. So I wanted to reorient you to that issue because if you were wondering why was I drawing a line in some of these areas and what was that little finger, remember those census blocks, because it's probably one of those census blocks if you're looking in that area.
Got it.
Did that answer the question?
Yeah.
I gotta tell you, I'm looking at the thing and great, I don't know what color you call it, salmon or whatever. That's open space.
Yeah.
I mean, but okay, yeah, we'll make that one work.
So again, that red one, I'm putting on the satellite imagery and you can actually see it's grabbing houses on the back side of the street there, and it's grabbing some houses up here. So it actually isn't, there's a lot of open space in between, which is the problem here. Is the Census Bureau normally would try to keep those in separate geographies, but they didn't in this case. And so it's forcing some communities that may not on the natural you think to put together, you're kind of being forced to put together.
Yeah, I what I'm saying is I'm looking at that and it doesn't seem to me that it's going to be that tough when we get down to clarifying questions, which we jumped on ahead of time. Anyway, anyone else before Michael continues? Go ahead, Michael.
Great. And now it's that technical issue. So now we just get to what do the lines do? And going back again to that green plan, and I'm going to turn off the boundaries here of your or leave on your existing. Whoops, I keep clicking the wrong thing. The existing boundaries here, and you see there's those handful of changes to conform to the census geography. And then the big issue, if you recall, in your existing boundaries is that District 4 is overpopulated, or I'm sorry, underpopulated, and District 3 is overpopulated. So District 3 has too much and District 4 has too little. And this green plan resolves that by adding in this area right in here. And that's the big population shift, is right in that area. And that was done in parts to move portions of the Bridges HOA, particularly the areas that are north of Bollinger, into a common district. So I'm going to turn on the green boundary without the coloring and turn on those HOAs, which were prioritized at the last meeting. And there you can see that Bridges HOA and how we're not able to unify all of it, but unify much more of it in District 4. Now, I will note that the green plan does not try to unify all of the HOAs. It's just trying to make the minimum amount of changes possible, because that was one of the options that was discussed at the last meeting. I'm going to zoom back out here and turn off those HOAs and bring back up now I'm going to bring up the blue plan and overlay again those existing district boundaries. I will note that the changes made in here are basically identical as to how you're solving those split blocks. So the action really isn't in these areas. The action is between District 3 and 4, where again, District 4 needs to add something that's currently in District 3. In the green plan, it was adding from the west. In the blue plan, it's adding from the east. And what you see there is that it's basically kind of smoothing out that boundary there and using Bollinger and Branch as the dividing lines. It's moving this little area back into 3 to kind of, again, smooth out that boundary. So you have that understandable boundary there of Bollinger and Branch between those two districts. And that is kind of the logic of the blue plan. So blue and green are very similar in that they are, how do you move the fewest number of people to fix the census blocks and get those population deviations? And that's kind of all they do. The purple plan and the red plan kind of go a step further and are a bit of a pivot in that what they do, and I'm just going to let blue stand for a moment there, is they do focus a little bit more on some of those communities of interest issues that were identified, even if they do trigger more significant changes to the existing boundaries. And in particular, in the eastern portion of the city, when you're talking about Gale Ranch and Windermere. And I'm going to highlight those two areas briefly because they really do flavor the purple and the red plan. And one thing that I will note there is that the areas highlighted there are the areas in blue are anywhere that the subdivision name mentioned Gale Ranch. Now, I was unclear at the last meeting whether all of that is when somebody said Gale Ranch, did they mean all that or did they mean a smaller area? So that is, again, a place of potential clarification. And second, the goal was to try to keep those areas as whole as possible. And that ended up being challenging for two reasons. One is that they're just really big. So for example, the Windermere area is that area highlighted in red and the areas kind of surrounded by them are 82% of the population of a district. So they're almost a district size. And as you can see, if they needed to add a little bit more, there's really nowhere to go without running into Gale Ranch. So it kind of forces you to split Gale Ranch to a certain degree because they're just physically in the way of each other. The other issue that comes up is the issue of packing, which this is something we talked about at the first meeting, which is an area where if you put all of an area into one district, you run the risk of vote dilution, where an area is only able to elect in one district, where if they're drawn into two districts, they actually have the ability to elect and influence the election in two districts. And that's particularly concerning when you look at Federal Voting Rights Act issues, because when you look at this, again, this Windermere area, it's more than 70% Asian. So it is a challenge there. So what I did with the purple and the red plans is not necessarily try to keep both of those whole, but try to keep them more whole and also try to just divide them in ways that might be a little bit easier for the communities to understand. So with that, I can turn off those two layers and turn on the purple plan. And what you see there is now the line between districts 3 and 4 is much different from those existing boundaries, because what you see there is, again, similar shifts with districts 1 and 2, not a lot of difference from those previous plans. The only really big change that you see is particularly in District 1. When I zoom in there and we turn on the purple plan, and we turn on those HOAs, you can see now those HOAs that were being split, where the kind of some of those HOAs along Canyon View are being split, they've now all been united under District 1. So that was, again, a place where there was direction to kind of look at those issues, try to keep more HOAs whole. So you see that larger shift than you saw in the previous plans, where it's a bigger change, but trying to reflect more communities of interest. And then if you zoom back out, you can see now, again, those HOAs trying to be respected, trying to use that understandable boundary where basically you're using Bollinger over to Windermere as the dividing line between districts 3 and 4 the whole way through on that purple plan. So again, that's kind of the logic that's being used there in, again, the purple plan. The other thing I will just note here is that that when you look at District 2, this is one place where that split block comes in, because if you were asking what that finger kind of up there was, that's that census block that we were talking about earlier. And so that is a place where that's the reason this is kind of going that way. And there are alternative options to deal with that. And that's why you're going to see those in some of the other plans. That I'm going to turn off the purple plan and move on to the red plan. And in the red plan, I'll note District 4 is identical. So District 4 in the purple plan and the red plan are identical. The changes really start in District 3. Where you see what's happening here is that split block we talked about earlier. Again, highlighted in red, where before that split block we were putting in District 2, we're now adding it to District 3. And because when I showed earlier and we were saying that was kind of an empty area, if you recall, and I put up the satellite imagery, there are actually a bunch of houses there on the back end of that area. And if I put up the HOAs briefly here, and I know we're kind of bouncing around through layers.
Deer Ridge and Royal.
Yeah, you're splitting Deer Ridge and Royal Ridge there with those that block. So to try to keep those whole, using the limitations we're stuck with, you see this kind of larger shift of District 3 to the west. What does that do? Now, District 3 has added that population, but it means that District 2 is now underpopulated. You've taken stuff out of District 2, and so it has to go add somewhere. So what you see there is, and I'm going to turn off these HOAs again. And this is an area, by the by, it was a little challenging because there aren't necessarily a ton of HOAs. This is an area that does not have as many of those. So if I turn those off, I'm just looking at my notes because I lost my place. Bear with me one moment. First, you see it moving, and I'm going to overlap those existing boundaries again. You see it adds in this little slice here, moving up to, and then there's this weird area there. And if you're wondering why is that, again, this is a place where we just unfortunately inherited a challenge from our friends in DC, in that that's a census block that I just highlighted in red. I don't know why they did that. It's something you certainly to suggest they not do next time. but it kind of forms a wall there, right? It's a dam that kind of makes it hard to shift population. That's why you got this kind of finger area there. It's not, again, trying to grab somebody's house or I don't know who lives there, anything like that. It's literally, it's just this census block, but you can't move north this way without grabbing this whole area. So that's where it just becomes the census geography kind of triggered what you're seeing there. But fundamentally,
Michael, one quick question. So that block, census block, if we in next election, for example, when is the next one after 10, like during next census, they are going to review this census
2030.
block, or do we need to appeal on that one? How that works?
so the block boundary suggestion program, again, generally starts in the 6th year. So it'll be coming in 2026, where you'll be able to have that process to suggest better census geography for your city, which will be able to mean you have a lot more flexibility come 2031. Unfortunately, we're kind of stuck here for the current redistricting.
Okay. And
Michael,
Who will
why
make
would
that
you do
recommendation?
it if there's no housing for the most part? The census is Chevron. I guess you have that little, no, that's off of Montevideo. That's just open space for, I mean, what you have is Inverness Park, the little gray thing there, I think is the school. Scott, chime in, isn't that where
But
Elizabeth works?
You
And-
do have some
and
housing
Chevron.
there, around the outside of Ascot.
Yeah.
And there's housing there.
You've got housing on the back side of the street, and then you've got
They
all
made
this
that a
housing over here.
separate tract?
This is
Yeah.
all one census block.
Yeah,
Oh,
and you
my
got
goodness.
Athen Downs and the people who live next to Athen Downs, and then the perimeter at Ascot. So it's kind of weird,
Yeah,
to say the least.
Yes, there are definitely some places in the city where I'm like, I don't really know what you are doing. Um,
So just to follow up on my question, so in future, in
Mhm.
let's say 2036, whatever, the next census block that they are going to redesign is like, do they expect city to give them the feedback, or do they have their own way of doing it? How that works?
So the federal government does this and they make those ultimate decisions, but again, they do have a specific program whose specific purpose is for local governments to be able to weigh in and say, don't draw a line there because that's dumb. And so that's the program that unfortunately San Ramon didn't know to prioritize, couldn't say, here's our existing district boundaries, don't run a census block through them, because in 2016, you didn't know you were going to have district elections, let alone what your district boundaries were going to be. So this is kind of, apologize for the colloquialism, this is kind of the hangover from the CAVRA conversion.
Oh,
And it'll, if that makes sense.
okay. Hopefully that will go away next time. Then.
So really what's happening here again is District 4 is staying the same. We made the decision to move District 3 further to the west, which pushed District 2 further to the north into District 1, which again is now adding this area around Canyon View Circle to unite some of those HOAs in that area. And then I'm going to turn this off here, and that'll bring us.
In that process, you split up where that big bulge was. Those people are, well, I don't know that they have an active HOA that is a community called Inverness Park. And so you've created one area and you've cut up another. So that doesn't, to me, that doesn't solve anything.
And I want to make, and I usually say this on the front end, but I think I forgot today, there's going to be plans you see where you're like, nope, throw it in the garbage. That was interesting. And that's perfectly fine. That's assumed, quite frankly, in this process. And sometimes it's seen trade-offs that, oh, well, if we didn't like that finger up here, what does it trigger down there? And those are the decisions that you all are going to have to confront, and why you're seeing some of these different plans and trade-offs. And there is an HOA that is in fact being split. You can see the boundaries there where it is occurring. So with that, I'm going to turn off again that HOA and bring us now to the orange plan. And the orange plan makes some different decisions here in that it's kind of solving that same problem we had here where all those split census blocks were, but it's doing it in the opposite direction. So instead of moving District 3 further to the west, you can see District 3 is basically stopping along Doherty. And then what you see there is now District 2 is keeping all of this area that was added during the annex that's kind of to the west of Doherty. And now this area that we were just talking about in Canyon View Circle is being united and drawn into District 2 to the south. What that does, though, is then leaves District 1, leaves District 2 overpopulated. So now District 1 is moving in the opposite direction, right? So now you're seeing District 1, if we overlay those existing boundaries, moving south into this area. This was something we did not talk about significantly. So I had to make some decisions about how to do that. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to turn on the orange plan without any color. And what I did is I went back to some direction from the original CVRA conversion and looked at the elementary school enrollment zones. And what you see there is trying to more closely follow those, with the Bollinger being now, because we went further north, being united in District 2. And then this is I'm blanking on the name. The Montevideo, that's why I always forget that one. Enrollment zone is now largely united into District 1. So that's, again, a different way of kind of solving this problem that we're having here. The other thing this allows for, which is different from the prior plans, is that we are now, because District 3 has now lost this area that, or does not including this area that to the west of Doherty, it now is expanding into District 4. And instead of having that kind of tail that's following down along Windermere, it's kind of evening off that shape there and putting most of that area into District 3 again, just because it's been an ongoing theme. This is, if you were wondering, these handful of blocks right there, that's a census block. You can notice how it kind of is blocking off those handful of census blocks. Again, I can't really tell you. And yes, there are some houses up here that are hitting those houses down there. So I can't tell you. So that's why that shape, that's that little divot. Again, it's not about anything in particular other than adjusting to that census data. So again, several different plans. The first two plans, both blue and green, are kind of make those minimum changes. One in the east and one in the west. With then the purple, the red, and now the orange plan, all trying to create more understandable boundaries in the eastern portion of the city, even when that means moving more people between districts, and then reflecting different solutions about what to do in kind of this canyon, I think it's called Canyon Circle area, Canyon View Circle area, and kind of what to do in there. So with that, I can just stop talking, and I'll just note that this is the software we have available. So Mr. Mayor, as after you take public comment, as you have debate and discussion tonight, I can have this up or have it down or turn it on and off based at your direction and discretion. And again, now I can stop talking, answer questions, or otherwise be of service.
Well, I would say if it's, I can't see the other people to have it up. So I would say, first of all, take it down, and then they're going to tell you to take it back up. But we've been asking clarifying questions. So before we go to opening the public hearing, I would just ask the council one last time. Do you have any clarifying questions? I don't see any hands from the panelists. So let's move right. I'll move the opening of the public hearing for the redistricting process.
A second.
A second from Burrows, first from Hudson. Any discussion on the matter? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Armstrong,
Yes.
Councilmember Perkins,
Yes.
Councilmember Zafar,
Yes,
Vice Mayor Barros,
Yes.
and Mayor Hudson.
Yes. So let's start off by getting the public comments. Public comments open. If you wish to speak under public comment on this item, please use the raise your hand feature on Zoom or dial *9 on your telephone when it's your turn to talk. We'll call upon you by name if provided. I'm dragging this out to see if more than one attendee wants to speak. Remarks are limited to 3 minutes per person and a clock will be running on Zoom. Okay, let's bring in call-in user number 1.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm very angry with Mr. Wagaman. He failed to advise all of us about the census blocks as well as the federal imposed boundaries that have messed up everything. I don't know why we have Mr. Wagaman. Who decided to hire him back again? He is a good friend of Mr. Rafferty's, and he was paid by AAPI lobbyist group last year. He should not be advising us because he is trying to get someone from communist China elected. He literally is telling us that, you know, our districts that where there is heavily communist China is going to be a problem for us. He is trying to get somebody he has in mind elected. I don't trust his advice. This is ridiculous. His advice is as good as garbage. Please hire another demographer. We should not have a demographer that keeps coming back to us year after year after year. Isn't there any other demographer out there? This is such a joke. It's a play. It really is a play. I have no respect for these hearings. It's a joke. Please hire a different demographer. Thank you.
If anyone else wish to speak to this during public comment, seeing none, we did have, I think 3, there may be more you received in your emails, remarks from the public. I'm not going to read them all now. One actually even had its own map.
There was a total of 8 written comments.
There were a total of 8.
Mhm.
I just had 3 before I went on. I'm sorry. We do have them available. You have had a chance to read it. And I'm looking, so there's no more attendees. There's no more written. So I would ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
A second.
Okay, I made the motion, I guess. Thank you, Vice Mayor Barros. Is there any further discussion on the motion to close the public hearing for this evening? Seeing none, let's have a roll call vote and then council discussion.
Councilmember Armstrong,
Yes.
Councilmember Perkins,
Yes.
Councilmember Zafar,
yes,
Vice Mayor Barros,
Yes.
Mayor Hudson.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you've seen a lot tonight. I would just say off the top of my head, Michael, I don't think I agree with the one comment you heard tonight. I don't envy this job. I mean, I'm looking at this, and when the federal government gets involved right away, things don't get real simple. And, you know, this is just one of these things we have to do. I mean, I'm going to kick it off to get some people to come out there. My first thought was, and I didn't like it because I think it takes away some of the neighborhoods I've belonged for a long time, that I thought the red kind of captured it, except for what was above Al Costa and Deer Ridge and Royal, but now I understand why. And I really think the idea of splitting up Inverness makes us look really ridiculous. I'd probably want to ask that census tract be thrown in there because there isn't that much of a difference. I don't think we're taking that much away from one if we did it, but you know, just some thoughts on that what was my district. You know, it's going to be real interesting. I don't feel bad about taking from one because, quite frankly, by the time 2026 comes around, that's going to be the highest populated district in the city. We aren't kidding anybody. They're going to be building over there. So some early comments. I'll go to council. I don't see any hands, but I'm trying to solicit some comments from you. Any feeling? No, I'm going to call you out. Oh, Scott, thank you for bailing them out because I was going to go to Mark. Go ahead, Scott.
My general preference is the blue and the green because they make the smallest changes so that the fewest people will be disenfranchised for this next election. And anytime you move a boundary, you're going to have a group of people that doesn't vote for 2 consecutive elections and a different group that will vote in 2 consecutive elections for council members. So that's my general bias is the blue and the green because they make the fewest changes. Now, I kind of leave it up to, Sridhar and Sabina, they're the ones that are affected by whether it's blue makes the most sense or green makes the most sense out of those 2 on the east side of the city. But on the west side of the city, blue and green to me make the most sense. And you're right, the one that creates that little aneurysm there into Inverness Park is possibly the worst of the bunch. The public one really distorts things in very, very odd ways. And that one never got off the ground. So my bias is the blue and the green, and I leave it to others to figure out which one really makes more sense.
Can we zoom into the blue and green?
Let me do this first because I just want to point out that the chicken put his hand up and then took it away. But Mark, are you going to speak to something now? Because then Sabina's going to get her. That's what I thought. Okay. What did you want?
I'm happy to. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I mean, taking this all in, I listened to again the criteria and everything. I kind of had some additional criteria I was looking at in terms of the simplicity and balance of population and kind of minimal disruption. And then also, I think it was really important to me was ease of understanding where the lines were being drawn. So, and from my background, I take a look at things. Is there an easily identifiable terrain feature like a creek or a ridge line or hills or major roadways and things like that? And then, of course, the neighborhoods and communities. And we all know kind of who's got to kind of give and take in terms of what districts have to shrink or build. I also think that green and blue is I prefer in terms of the effect on District 2. I like those better than the other options. Purple, I can live with, I think, except I have some issues with it. The thing I like about green and blue, I like to me, it adds in there up at the Bridges golf course and the driving range up in there. That neighborhood up in there, I don't know the name of the neighborhood, the South Gale Ridge Road and Velvet Leaf Circle. Those are off of Bollinger, kind of coming down to the south.
That's still Bridges, yeah.
Yeah, east of the creek there by the golf course.
Yeah, that's still Bridges.
And then they also include those new areas really to the west of Doherty Road, the Bergamot Way and Rosamond Drive and Elderberry Drive. So I'm good with that. I would say that the problem I had with the purple one was that it didn't include that new housing to the west of Doherty Road, and I kind of liked the way you had included that in there. And I would even take that a step further, and maybe at some point we'll get to the map and draw this in there. But I would even go on just to the east of Doherty Road. There's some new housing developments in there, but it's kind of bounded by the creek that goes in there.
Alamo Creek.
Yeah, Alamo. It's one of the branches of Alamo Creek. And so I would say even include there, and that's, Bella Vista School and all that piece, but just right along that Doherty Road section, but bounded by that creek. So that's how I would tweak that a little bit. And then the other tweak I would make to either the green or the blue plan, I think it was in the red plan where you had that little section by Montevideo where you kind of squared it off a little bit cleaner. Montevideo is a nice dividing line, but then if if you can cut at Veracruz and cut over to Al Costa, that to me is a cleaner break than right now where it's going, I think it's Toledo and Escobar Place and things like that. It kind of goes Montevideo and then kind of up and then over to get to Al Costa. So I like kind of the red plan in terms of that very northeastern corner of District 2. But I don't like the red plan in terms of, again, that little aberration of Inverness Park being in there. I think that's probably.
Well, we can come back to it, Mark.
Yeah,
We're
we can
just
come
trying to
back
get
to it.
initial
I
ideas.
actually do have another thought.
Go
but we'll
ahead.
Come back to it. No.
Okay, we'll come back to it. Sabina, you wanted something put up? Where's she go?
Yeah,
Oh, there you are. You're on mute. How's it feel? You're
let's
on-
look at the blue a little closely and the green. One,
He's coming.
So hopefully you're seeing the blue screen here.
Not
loading.
yet, but it's close.
the black screen.
There you
There we
go.
go.
So the blue plan that you're seeing here, where again, that primary shift is to move down and use Branch and Bollinger, and this is the primary area being shifted, versus the green plan, where the primary shift is in that kind of Bridges HOA area where it's using everything north of Bollinger in the Bridges, and then everything to the west of the creek in the Bridges is moved into District 4.
And that's, and can you zoom in closer to 4 and 3 a little bit?
Which portion?
Maybe the dividing line between right there by Bollinger. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
One of the other things I liked about blue and green is it took District 1 and made it one of the smaller districts, and because that's where the population is going to grow the most.
That's
And I
right.
know we can't completely, counteract that and, make it a really small, because then you get small districts and big districts. But I really like having District 1 smaller than the average going in, because coming out 10 years from now, it's going to be bigger than the average.
That's right. Go ahead, Sabina. You still have the floor.
Yeah, and then Sridhar, do you have any comments on this? I kind of like the green one because it seems to keep the Bridges together, right? Is that what it's doing?
Pretty much of it, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That's right, yeah.
I
So,
can show it.
yeah, so
overlay
for
here.
me, green makes more sense because my guideline principles are two key guideline principles. One is least disruption, because we already ran one election based on the districts, and we spent a lot of time, energy, and a good chunk of money in the communities so that we could guide them, educate them about this whole district process. So the least disruption, the easier for them to get used to the next election. That is one thing. And the second one is my next guidelines is about disfranchise. We need to minimize or if we can eliminate that will be great, or minimize the disfranchise, like Council Member Perkins mentioned, right? So that residents get a chance to vote in this next election to pick their council member, right? So those are my two guideline principles. Based on that, I would prefer green, and that's my first priority. And otherwise, the second priority is going to be purple. But green is my number one priority.
If I can go back to Sabina on this, because it almost sounds like we can give a pretty good, I mean, we're not going to do it tonight, but it sounds like we're gravitating towards green. I liked red until you explained Inverness to me, and that's just terrible. I mean, there's a reason why we called it SOMAC when this city was forming south of Montevideo, even though Inverness was part of it. I'd hate to start jerry-rigging something you got here because of that federal stuff. But it really, to me, is what Scott said last. And Scott, if I'm wrong, correct me. Sabina, Sridhar, how do you feel about 3 and 4? Because that's where the battlegrounds will be if we're going with green. I know you gave 2 alternatives, Scott, but after hearing what we've been hearing, am I wrong, or would it not hurt to spend 5 or 10 minutes getting feedback on District 3 and 4 on green?
Well, yeah, that to me, 1 and 2 don't change between green and blue.
Yes.
Green and blue you make some adjustments between 3 and 4. You move from one side to the other. And so that's where Sabina and Sridhar live. So I really look to them to tell us which works the best on that side of the city.
And I think I just hugged something similar. I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Mark, but I mean, we could sit down and start working on moving this in and moving this out. But we've given Mr. Wegeman some information, and now I'd really like to focus on District 3 and 4 if we can for a minute on the possibility of green. Doesn't mean you can only discuss green.
Yeah,
but
so
green.
I was just gonna say, I agree with Vice Mayor that green and purple both make sense to me.
Okay.
Purple is much cleaner lines, so for the OCD that works. Kind of sits together well.
What is the popular number 1 district becomes really big in purple, and so it really.
Is it by population or by area?
No, by population.
Eventually, maybe like in 10 years or
No,
right
it
away.
makes it bigger now. That's the problem.
Yes.
It's bigger now. Not just what it's going to be like in a few years. It's what it is. It's bigger now, and that's, to me, that creates its own kind of problem. If you look at purple, in fact, it's only a few. It's over the deviation by 743. Whereas in green and blue, it's under by 687. In fact, purple, that makes the District 1 at its largest. It also creates the biggest, remember the number that we want to keep under 10, which is the minus number plus the plus number. This is 8.5 in this case. So it's the one that deviates the most from the average, and it makes District 1 not quite the biggest, but nearly the biggest. I think it deviates from that process by the most.
For District 2, I also lose about 3.5% from District 2.
Yes.
Whereas I already was a little bit low. And
Right.
I'm losing an additional 3.5% in this purple option.
So if you look at the green, then the deviation is 6.6, right? That makes much more less deviation there, right? So and also if we
apologize. One thing I would note on the purple plan, and just as you are looking at these, is yes, there was, as you recall, that direction about trying to leave District 1 lower, and this was the only plan where that didn't get accomplished.
Right.
I would note District 2 is currently underpopulated, and there was some discussion about adding areas into District 2 from District 1. So, for example, that's about 255 people in that area there. If you like purple, but you want the deviation in 1 to be lower, it would be what are those areas that could be shifted, particularly between Districts 1 and 2. That's not something you have to do. You don't have to like the plan, but in trying to guide feedback, if that was the type of direction you wanted to give, is one variant you want is a variant of purple that reduces the size of District 1 and takes something out of 1. And if there are particular areas, that's guidance you could give or you could not give.
Before you start going that far, and if we can stay on green for a minute, Sridhar, my concern, if you go to purple, and I want you to take a look at it, is the number of voters you're gonna have in that district is really low.
Number 3.
And not just population, but the voters. That's the lowest one, I think, of all the groups. You're under 9,000. I mean, when the rest of us, the 1 and the 2, I should say, not necessarily 4, but 1 and 2 would have over 12,000 voters.
Yeah, that makes sense. So as Michael mentioned, right? So if we need to, okay, in that case, we cannot really touch much of the 3. We can touch on the 2 so that we can increase that.
You know,
right?
one of the,
I think in that case, I think when I'm looking at green, even green got less here. Let me see. Yeah, so, but that's much better, I think. Yeah. 6.6 deviation.
you know, because the distribution of voters and the distribution of population aren't homogeneous to the same extent. You're going to have those kinds of shifts because it looks like in District 3, there's a fewer people out of the total population that are registered voters. And
I'm not trying to make it the issue, Scott. I just
And
want to make
change.
sure it was disclosed.
yeah,
That's good. So that can change also, right? So
Oh, everything's
And
gonna change
just-
drastically and pretty darn quick in 1. I mean, my problem, I liked red until I saw what was going on in Inverness. I just felt it was a trade-off. We get Inverness back and everybody in Royal Ridge and Deer Ridge can hate me. I'm sorry, but that's just the south of Montevideo territory was completely disenfranchised. It doesn't make sense just to take them out of the block. But now it's probably the same thing with Inverness Park, and I don't want to go messing it up to the point where we start losing a population. But Scott's point is spot on. We aren't kidding anybody. Within 5 years, whatever you took out of there tonight would be back double or triple. I mean, they're going to build there. The only thing I know for sure that I hope is built in 2 right now is if you
Aspenwood.
stayed red would have been Robert's program, but this way you have the Carmelita and some of the others that are also still being constructed without changing the suggestion that was made about Doherty Road if you just stay that way. And I'd get nervous about cutting down District 3 after this too. It just, I think Doherty Road is a good, good dividing spot.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
it
So it
comes
looks
back
like
to me is 3 and 4. We really need to hear from you, I think, at this point.
yeah. So we are.
Okay, wait a minute, Sabina, ladies first, let's do that because we haven't
No,
heard enough
that's
out of it.
fine. Vice Mayor, go ahead. You were speaking first.
Oh, no, that's fine. So as one thing I understand here on this call is pretty much majority of us are inclining towards green, right? So that's one thing I'm hearing.
Yeah.
So that's my priority. My first priority is green. That's what as I mentioned, right? So, and also I just wanted to say that as purple as my alternate, but if we are good with green, I'm good with it.
Yeah, I'm good with green.
Okay, I'm going to come back to you, Mark, because I cut you off. You said there was something different and you had 2 suggestions that I'm going to try and talk you out of. One is messing with Doherty Road, and the other one, I think Inverness Park's going to be in 1 for a while, but how do you feel?
I think Inverness Park needs to stay in 1.
Okay.
But I do want to, I like what Michael did a minute ago to add in that red block that he had. Yep, right, wherever you had that.
Census block.
Well,
Okay.
actually, you know what'd be best is
Yeah,
not
right
to add
there.
it into 1, but there's another segment. If you follow, zoom in on that, if you will, Michael. If you zoom in and you instead you just follow Montevideo. Oh, excuse me. No. You're take
right.
that out of 1 and put it into 2. Yes,
That's what I'm
along
saying.
Fair
That's what
Creek.
I'm saying, because
Yes.
there's a logical break. There's a creek right there,
Yes.
and it's
Yes.
all naturally a
Yes.
community in there, and you've split up that community. The other places, since you got that exploded, Michael, when you cross over Al Costa right there at Veracruz, and right now, yeah,
Yep. Yep.
right there, you can see, and I can't point to it, but there's Canyon Green Drive. If you zoom in a little bit more,
Up the hill.
yeah.
Yep.
This area.
So
It's the green- it's the big green thing.
If you took Canyon, boy, you're too far north now.
That's part of the block too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So now, if you were to kind of cut straight across,
That's
not
the
there.
creek. No,
Yeah.
So this is following Coyote Creek currently,
I
with the
understand.
highlighted red area.
Yeah. So instead of Coyote Creek, I think it's Deer Ridge community.
That's over here to the
Draw the
right
line
where the
on
two is.
The northern boundary of Deer Ridge,
Mhm.
and instead of where it is right now, and there's some streets in there that are part of the Southern Canyon Lakes HOA
Mhm.
area in there that are just off by themselves in District 2, but they're not, nothing else is in District 2 other than that isolated island of a couple streets in that gated community. You see where it says Canyon Green there?
Yep.
That to me, I would rather see the line kind of cut along the north end of Deer Ridge and then start heading north instead of on the creek right there.
Mhm.
You follow me?
It's where the light green is, Michael. He's saying follow the line where the Deer Ridge light green is, because that
This
is
area.
completely
That corner. Yep.
isolated from a
That's it.
gated community.
Yep.
That's that corner right there.
So that is
Oh,
Yeah,
our
that's
favorite
that
census
thing.
block.
oh,
That's
you
what I
can't
was
cut
saying,
it up.
Mark. And the other part of the problem is if you add that other little piece that you were talking about adding, because it makes sense off of Veracruz, that's all one development. That was actually the sixth phase of the development that starts down by the freeway. That was all Chappelle built way back when. And then the next thing they went to was Inverness Park. That's why I said, man, that's goofy. Those things were built in the late 70s and 80s. But, you know, I'm good enough with or without that little portion. Obviously, what you're saying, Mark, makes complete sense. But I don't want to mess with that federal thing. So it's that little piece that you did in red, if you were just going to add that, if nobody has a problem with in one.
I think that's a good idea,
Yeah.
that stretch on Veracruz, but yeah, that piece right there.
Yep.
Right.
Move that from 1 to 2.
1 to 2. And I would like to see that corner. Now, I don't mind having it. It's not a big deal to me. I'm just saying from a logical community,
It makes for a better community.
that Canyon Green area is very isolated away from the rest of their neighbors,
Yeah.
if you will. And it put it in District 2, just a couple streets in there. And so it didn't make any sense to
But
me.
you can't,
But it's that
you
federal
can't break
thing.
up a census block.
Yeah.
Well, we are, but.
No, we aren't.
But we can do the block boundary suggestion project thing and fix it.
Yeah,
6 years from now.
26. We could do it in 2026. Okay, before you leave that red area you're talking about, let me try this one more time. That road, Veracruz, goes all the way down to the freeway.
No,
No,
Okay, at Montevideo, you have Meadowwood in there also. You want to leave that in one,
No.
Scott?
yes,
Okay, no,
Yeah.
I'm not driving in that way. I'm just saying, do you
No.
want to do it? And the answer I just got is yes.
the
Anyone from-
Veracruz, the
There's a
Veracruz
creek.
section, yes.
yeah.
That's how many people,
Minimal.
The area we were just highlighting here,
yes.
Yeah.
Yep,
it was 255 people. So,
okay.
this is all stuff I can do as cleanup, but I wouldn't imagine this is going to do anything to make these unacceptable deviations.
Good.
Okay.
That's all we care about right now.
So.
Anybody
so-
from 3 or 4 want
Yeah.
to chime in on this?
Oh, not on this one, but I have something on 3.
Well, Dave,
Okay,
I just
before we
I wanna
leave
go-
this, Mark, Scott, you want to say something?
No, I like that little change, and if we can make Sabina and Sridhar happy with some adjustments in green, then
Okay, we're
I
getting
think we've
close.
got ourselves a an optimal plan.
Okay, Mark, you still have something you're going for here.
Well, I mean, I just wanted to kind of go back to the Doherty Road. I know that's a nice clean break there, but take a look, you're splitting up a subdivision in there with that road. And-
Actually, they're separate
Oh.
subdivisions.
They're separate. There's 4 or 5
Oh.
divisions in there.
Yeah.
The
I-
one HOA is Lexington that is
Yeah.
kind of bridges over.
Exactly. Right. And so what I'm saying is I can't read the other ones, but it's
Serena, Cordova, or
And
these are the
Carmelita.
HOAs. Did you want the subdivisions or the HOAs?
No. I was just saying, I thought that the creek line there to the east of that, those 3 areas would, if you pull that into District 2, then to me, they're geographically separated from the other side of the creek. There's no way to even drive across
Yeah.
that area.
So they're like uphill from, so the right side that you're seeing right now in the red color, that is all downhill. And then the other side is all uphill.
Where's that federal line, the census?
So I think that red color, right?
So this is that weird census block. This was the area you were just describing following the
Yes.
creek,
Yeah.
And where's the
or as
census
close as I
block?
can get to the. So the area highlighted in red is actually several census blocks, but this
Uh-huh.
was the area I believe that was being described as potentially moving from District 3 into District 2.
Yeah, I was only describing that only because when I go out there and I look, it's like you cannot, those neighbors in there have really no connection other than a path. There's a path that goes across the creek into that other area, but you're not driving in there. They're really geographically separated, and just that's all I was thinking. I'm not hard over on this.
Yeah. Now, my feeling is you're taking a census area, a brand new area that's completely different than everything else that's really District 2. But my issue was that it was part of that federal thing. And what you're telling me is it isn't, so it's fair game.
Yeah, I don't think it is, and
Okay.
that those neighborhoods did not vote in the last
That's
election.
right. They
so
did not vote
Well, I
last.
guarantee you they didn't.
Yeah, because it was not annexed, right? During last election, it wasn't yet annexed. So that's why they didn't have the chance.
Well, Sridhar, it's your district. I mean,
Yeah.
you
I'm
want to
I'm-
fool with the numbers on that, or is it something we need to take a
Wow.
look at down the road, or where are we at?
How many people are in that area?
A lot more than you think.
Yeah.
It's 743 people, and this is a place where you may want to have a couple of variants. So as an example of what I mean by that is we have a green plan, correct?
Yep.
I can put together a green plan that moves the area along the creek. And then I can create one that shifts this area, sees if there's anything else I need to do to balance the deviations. And you'd be able to have, a line plan and a chartreuse plan that you can then look at and see which one does it better. You don't have to sell all of those. So if these are places where you've landed in architecture, and if there's some nuances you want me to explore, I can happily do that between meetings. And then in district hearing 4, if there's let's move one block at a time, we can do that. Happy to continue to exercise those.
How's that
to
sound,
inform.
guys?
Sounds like a good
Sabina,
idea.
We
you
can do
game
that.
for that, Sabina?
Yeah. I think
Okay. Anything else we can add to this that we can thoroughly confuse Michael with?
So on District 3, near the East Branch Parkway, right? You see that East Branch, there is, I just want to see what is the census block there. Yeah, that one. What is the census block? Because I remember, yeah.
So you actually have pretty good census blocks here. The only one that gets screwy here is this one right there. So all this area in here, if there's a better line between districts 3 and 4, you would have a fair degree of flexibility. The only other one I would note here is this is the other one that's limiting is you got to either you got to move one way or the other, but then once you get to one side or the other, you have a fair degree of flexibility.
Oh, okay. So could you please put that census block on Windermere Parkway? I was looking at that straight line on the Windermere Parkway.
In this area?
Not in that area. The one at East Branch Park. East Branch
down
Park.
here in this area.
Yes, yeah. I just want to
So that's
see.
East Branch Park and Windermere.
Yeah. how it looks if we straight line the Windermere Parkway.
This whole area
That's
is a
right.
So this is a relatively large area. There's about
Okay.
2,000 people there. So that would be a place that if you wanted to add that to District 3, you would start trading out something from District 4 up here. And now all of a sudden you start seeing how two plans start coming together, because suddenly that green plan is going to start looking like the purple plan, right?
Yes.
So that could be a variant if you wanted to explore, as a secondary option, basically.
Yeah, I mean, like during my last election, people were getting confused why the other street is voting, why they are not voting. That's why I want to make sure that what is the logic behind it. So, okay, it's all a whole census block. Okay, fine.
And this was an area I will note that the last redistricting, there was less flexibility because some of those federal Voting Rights Act issues. So the last council did not have as much option there. So again, it's at your discretion, and it is that trade-off of, is it better to let those people vote and stay in the same district so they don't get what's called deferred?
Makes sense.
Or do you want to play with those boundaries between 3 and 4, and knowing if you're adding to 3, you're probably taking away somewhere else?
Well, that's where I'm going to come back
Yeah,
to
I
you,
think that's why
Sabina.
purple looked cleaner, because it was keeping that block together.
Yeah.
And it was the issue that we started out with, where we didn't want people to miss 2 elections in a row.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So this looks like
Purple?
more like purple, right? Yeah.
It is purple.
That this purple is on the screen at the moment. So you can see how if you added there and then subtracted in the communities, Villa Paseo, that kind of area, does that as a trade-off. So again, that is direction I can take, because we're going to create a couple of different options, which are, I'm hearing certainly a favor towards districts 1 and 2, as in the green and the blue plan, with the change along the creek, exploring an option along Doherty Road. And what happens if you go east of Doherty, and then wanting to either keep an option that largely preserves the current lines as under green, and potentially seeing an option that tries to make these boundaries a little bit more smooth in between districts 3 and 4, and we can preserve those options.
That between the 3 and 4 on the top left. Yeah, over here,
This area under which plan?
under this purple plan.
This purple plan.
If we want to pursue purple, I really want to, we're plus 743 in District 1, and we're minus 800 in District 2. So I would really want to push a whole bunch of, you could push 1,000 people from 1 to 2, and it would be a whole lot cleaner.
So to clarify what am hearing as a potential direction, doesn't need to be a direction, was actually taking kind of a blend of green and purple.
Yeah.
Where green would be, districts 1 and 2 would be green with a couple of amendments we've discussed, and then exploring districts 3 and 4 looking a little bit more like purple, just so you would see what that would look like. So it would be a half and half.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And it won't be exactly, because I have to balance the deviations, but that's a direction that I'm hearing as a scenario you want to see.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, guys, anything additional before we kick him to the corner or whatever we do?
Send him back to his machine.
Yeah, whatever it is. I think you made a lot of strides on this. We're looking at different things, but it's going to get narrowed down. Anybody that wanted to listen to this could have. You have to think, we went from the heck with districts to doing our second edition already. And frankly, I think there's something there that's just about ready to take to the group or take to the public. But let's see what Michael can bring back. And any last words that you could tell him?
I really appreciate the hard work that goes into this. And, you know, there's a piece of me, the techie piece of me says, you know, this could be kind of fun. I suppose it gets old after a while, Michael, but
That's that engineer.
But
That you do.
there's an element of this that looks kind of interesting. Squeezing a balloon is kind of a different kind of thing, huh?
And
Well, I really appreciate this council and all your direction. It's been very helpful. Thank you.
I just want to, as we, cut up the districts and everything, I just want to continue reminding people that we represent all of San Ramon. So
Absolutely.
it should not distract from the fact that we might be running from these districts.
Yeah.
But we're representing everybody in San Ramon.
I think the other side of it is, Sabina, just trying to tell people, look, take a look at this thing as if you were the person that's out there trying to figure it out, and their representatives looking at you. And the reality is that somebody's going to say it's not great. But the options that we looked at, I think we've looked at just about all of it. We touched on it and we said, bring back some. I know I've got one caller that wants to do, but public comment is closed. And there's no separate public comment for the evening. It's just listening to what we have to say. But if there's no further discussion, let's adjourn to the next meeting that's going to be held on March 22nd. Does that sound about good? Okay, I got the official wave goodbye. So thank you all for coming out. And I think we're getting closer. We'll see you next Tuesday? Next Tuesday for the real. See you then. Night all.
Thanks. Good night. guys.
Night.